focus not on what you're lacking, but the areas that you can make a difference. Fill your cup so then you can be able to fill other people's cup.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to podcast number 112 of the Gordon and Cherise Show. We're carrying into episode number 2, and it is so great to carry this episode with you in this present moment in this room, Jake Selly. Jake is our oldest son, my son through marriage with Gordon. He came into my life when he was 7 years old, and this kid, he was amazing. He was well beyond his years, star athlete. He was so many things.
What happened?
Everything. You're even more amazing now every year. But let me just say the topic of this podcast is a son's perspective about chronic pain. And I dare say, though, we're not going to make this episode about weepy pain, and we're not going to perseverate on the pain in this episode, even though we did talk about the initial struggles and trials on the last episode. We kind of set a little bit of the foundation of your life as a child and how that shaped you. We've talked a little bit, Gordon, you brought up about success and transformation, that there's a difference between those. We talked about unanswered prayers and really and truly unanswered prayers about pain. Why didn't Dad just get magically healed? And Gordon said that I am healed to you when you were in college. It changed something that's very, very important to discuss on this episode, which is mindset.
Good morning.
Good morning, honey.
And I bet Jake must have felt frustrated because he did have prayers as a child for Deion Sanders to receive Christ as his Savior, and he did. So why didn't his dad become healed?
True.
That's pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Jake. Good to see you for the second podcast. I definitely want to hear from you. I'm very proud of you as a son. I like the way you've persevered through different trials in your life. I want to get to some quick questions for Jake. And I know he is strong. He is a top business person in Australia. I want to hear about your job, your position, some of the lessons you've learned from your childhood and suffering and growing up through your own life, and the discipline you have with reading at least 25 to 30 books a year, and always you're representing the epitome of what it means to move forward and to renew your mind and to go ahead and take those action steps. A lot of people sit on the sidelines. And part of this podcast is we're helping people to take action steps.
Absolutely.
Get out of bed, pick up your mat, and move forward.
Because a lot of people in pain right now that are listening, they may have a grown child or they may have a little child, but there is something that can be contributed.
Right. And we're not speaking to people who can't physically get out of bed, or it doesn't show clinical stability that they should, or it's against doctor's orders. It's for at least those 100,000 people right now who can make a change in their life and make a change for the better.
But I dare say this, the person that is in bed and acutely suffering, because you were there, Gordon.
I was there for years.
It's still about mindset.
Yes, it is.
Which, Jake, you haven't said one word yet. We haven't let you.
I'm just inspired. I'm just listening, loving it.
So I think this is where I believe, Jake, that always, since the first day I met you, there is a mindset that you have carried, and you've matured into it. But you've really amazingly grown through your own suffering, watching your dad suffer, and the fact that I think parts of you grew up very quickly because you wanted to be, as you mentioned, the helper in the last podcast. You naturally want to not put your parent through more pain. But I would say this, Jake, even though as a child, I think it helped you watching your dad go through pain carried a bigger load on your life. you also got this side benefit. Who would have expected the benefit that has now carried, I believe, into the amazing man that you are today and into your adult life? And this mindset that is helping you change the business world, corporate America, the people that you're sowing your life into. So can you go into a little bit about what you do present day?
Yes. So for my career, I in digital advertising technology, and I help lead sales across Asia Pacific. And it's very focused on technology, AI, so I'm not going to get into it. Basically, we can help you understand how much attention is paid to advertising. And, you know, I think kind of going back to this point where growing up and having to grow up too quickly and not wanting to be a burden, how did that start to bubble up and come out in me early? I became a perfectionist. And in a lot of ways, that's not a good thing. And so throughout this time in the transformation of mindset, I've had to learn what me wanting to be a perfectionist actually is. And it comes back to this point of transformation versus success. And when I look at success as an outcome-oriented situation where you want to hit the end result. And my perfectionism was focused on success.
It's almost transactional, isn't it?
It is transactional. And it's that point of wanting to win, but not necessarily wanting to do the steps to win. And so part of growth in that mindset is understanding the transformation and understanding that journey throughout it. And that success will be there, but my true success is when I can focus on what's going on through the transformation and seeing myself grow through this time.
Yes.
That's really good, Jake.
Yes.
I love that perspective, actually.
Very much so. His son JJ is still in the winning phase right now for success. Folks, we're biased grandparents, obviously, but he's wonderful. I want to ask you a few questions, as I mentioned earlier. So, besides your story, and I think every parent hears this from their children, they hear stories about how they perceive their own parents or what their version of the truth may have been or what the narrative is in their life.
I feel like you're really setting yourself up.
I probably am. Okay. But saying all of that, and as you've ventured into leadership, which you have, and obviously we're very proud of you, but as you've moved into that direction, what type of trials have you had to endure, okay, over your life? And share this present mindset. Share this way that you've had the renewal of the mind.
I'd say biggest trial I've had is moving to Australia and having to set up shop basically with my wife, creating a completely new life for ourselves, not having the safety or security blanket of what I would have if I stayed in Colorado, and having to literally forge my own path. And, you know, I always thought about it. I moved to Australia, the biggest island in the world, and you feel like you're on an island in so many ways because you're isolated from your family, you're isolated from everything you knew, you're isolated from even your network. And so having to start from the ground up of being able to build that up.
May I excuse you?
No.
Okay. At the age...
Hold on. I'm making a point here.
No.
I'm just kidding.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're interrupting, honey.
At the age of 23,
Yeah.
to set the scene.
That was
Go
pretty
ahead.
remarkable.
Yeah. And I would say that most of my 20s was, you know, I wouldn't be able to tell you necessarily what I believed or what I stood for, but I could tell you what I wouldn't believe or what I wouldn't stand for. And there was this process of going through kind of this silent period of not necessarily knowing how to express my thoughts or express my mindset. And so there's this journey of having to learn and transform. And I think that's this component of being shaken up and thrown into an element of chaos. And it's very similar in a way to chronic pain, where you have to go through this complete just reinvigoration of what your life is now going to become now that you've been thrown into an element of chaos that you weren't expecting. And even though mine was a little bit self-inflicted by moving to Australia, there was still very much an element of having to rediscover who I was, rediscover what my path would be and how do you carve it out. And a lot of it was in certain ways accidental, but there's a lot of ways that you've got timeless principles that can help lead you through it.
Can you discuss some of those?
No.
Okay.
Secret.
Okay.
No, I think, especially coming back to this transformation versus success mindset of being outcome oriented or being focused on the process. And we too often seek this magic bullet of wanting this short route, the quick hit to success, making sure that, if somebody's speaking on stage, you get people coming up to them afterwards saying, what have you done? How have you gotten to this point? And they're looking for an answer like, oh, just go spend $500 on this course and you'll be sweet type thing. But when it comes down to it, it is literally looking at every single day and saying, how can you win the day? Taking 5 core, like what I try to do, 5 critical tasks. And these are tasks that are important, but not necessarily urgent. And they're things that I know are going to help make me become the man that I want to be. And so in this seeking transformation, I'm not necessarily seeking a status. I'm not necessarily seeking an outcome of how much money I want to make, but I'm seeking the values of the man that I want to become. And so these 5 critical tasks are key things that help move me there. So, it's something as simple as getting up and exercising in the morning, reading 10 pages a day, taking time to journal, taking time to invest in my mind. And then when I go back, I'm full to be able to parent. I'm full to be able to accomplish the hard things, tackle the hard things at work. And all of that begins to bleed out. And it's that component of every single day, little steps towards the future and transformation.
When I hear you say that, I feel like you're living life, even if you're exhausted from being a parent and your schedule of work and all of that, but you're finding ways to fill yourself up so that you don't parent and do life from a depletion standpoint, but that you do it from like, I'm overflowing, I have something to give.
And even being so exhausted on being a parent, you're more exhausted if you don't get that time to invest in yourself.
That's so good.
Would these core values then be of assistance to those who have broken relationships or those who feel hopeless or those who feel like they're down in the dumps?
Yes.
And you would start different people if their health was approved enough where they could make some changes with their life. What exactly are those 5 steps again?
So these 5 steps are 5 critical things for your life specifically.
Okay.
And I try to look at it from a physical perspective, from a mental, a spiritual, and emotional. And if I keep those core things in mind and try to think, okay, how can I help myself physically? Well, is it even just going on a walk, getting on the treadmill, doing 10 minutes, focusing on staying in your lane in the beginning where your feet are burning, your head is pounding, you're going through so much pain, but yet you still choose in that the beginning process of transformation, doing just that little bit to get that 1% better every single time.
I have a question because you were talking about the perfectionist in you earlier. So these 5 steps, how do they not make you more of a perfectionist? How does it give you room to find this newer, more cohesive version of Jake?
Because within those 5 steps, I'm very focused on learning. And that's the kind of mental aspect and emotional aspect where learning through reading and writing, getting other perspectives. And, everybody talks about the value of a mentor, but it's very hard to get a mentor and to get the right people to invest in your life. But at the same time, you've got books written by incredible thought leaders. And in an indirect way, they can be mentoring you through the words that they have. And so this has helped me learn so much about understanding where I was seeking out success versus what I can be doing to be growing as an individual.
That's so good. Really and truly.
And that helps people who are, the message is this, here's what's hopeful. You can learn though you're suffering.
Absolutely.
And when you walk through pain, it is partly walking. I know I've been on the treadmill for how many years, how many days walking through the pain, no matter what. Okay? And it is making changes with your mind if you're deciding to read and study and you want to get the thought leaders, as Jake has mentioned. It is the way you eat and not having inflammation in your body, or all the different steps that you look at. And I bet those 5 core values also interact dynamically and change. Is that correct?
It does transform to the stage of your life that you're in, challenges that you're going through. Very much so. And, that's something that I don't necessarily do the same 5 things every day, but making sure that I have those 5 things each day that I'm investing in myself.
So it's adaptive.
It's adaptive.
So what I like about that mindset, Jake, is it's relational. It's you're actually in relationship with yourself, assessing yourself for that day. And when you're in chronic pain, I think it very much dovetails into that whole idea, because Gordon, some days you can do the treadmill or you could walk, or some days you had to be in bed. But if you would adapt, I would see you also in a similar mindset, adapting to what your best could be for that day. And you can't base a best day for today on what it was 5 years ago. It's there can sometimes going backwards, you can go forward again. Sometimes having to reapply or adjust. I find that being adaptable is so important, even in my role in this family, being adaptable. Because if I get set in one complete mindset or one way that I used to do things, I can't be flexible for all the new that is coming into this home, our household, our family.
And I think the people in chronic pain, I think Jake's hitting on some very salient points. Number one, many people feel like they have wasted lives. So a lot of Jake's program and the way he lives his life, which I actually admire greatly. Okay, I'm very proud of him. I really like what he's doing. So here he is. He's not focused on wasted stuff, but he saw that wasted stuff with my life. And he saw that wasted stuff in his own life through some of the journey where he said, you know what? That's not what I want to be part of, but here's what God does. There's nothing wasted. It's used to help change your mindset.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't recognize that enough. It's used when you sense the wasted time, or you sense that you can just stare at the walls for hours and the paint feels like it's just slowly peeling off the walls and you're just doing nothing with your life. That's a catalyst alone. That's a form of emotional suffering. That's a form of mental depletion that says, okay, I'm moving forward. So it's not really wasted time. People, you don't have wasted time. But guess what? The flip side is Jake's in the journey.
Definitely.
Okay? So the journey is make the best use of your time. That's in the epistles of Scripture. Make the best use. And that's what he's doing. And he's trying to seek wholeness with it, which he's in that process of wholeness, which is beautiful, which is absolutely beautiful. So if you were to give advice to your younger self, what changes would you have made earlier?
It definitely would have been focused on mindset, 100%. I was very much of just wanting to hit the outcome, and a lot of times I would be taking shortcuts in ways to make sure I could get there.
Sure.
And I would always recognize a point that I would be willing to be hardworking up until a specific point, kind of my own breaking point. And this is something that I've had to learn and constantly try to push that breaking point. And that's a key area of growth for me, is making sure that I can overcome that. And so I used to always be so scared about being like a Jake of all trades, master of none, where I'd be above average at everything, but not great at any one thing. And that was very much around my mindset as well, because I felt like, my mindset would only take me so far. And so, what was your question again?
No, I just enjoy hearing what you're saying is, what advice would you give your younger self at an earlier stage?
Yeah, so I would say embrace being a Jake of all trades. But, you don't have to become the very best person in the world at one specific thing. There's a guy named Stephen Bartlett who very much respect in terms of the business world and what he does. And he talks about being the best without being actually the best. And he focuses on concepts called skill stacking, where he looks at 6 key transferable traits throughout his life. And he says, what are these 6 key traits that I can be in the top 10% at? Because if you look at 1 million people and you're in the top 10% at each one of these individual traits, you actually become number 1 at these key elements of traits together. So there's an element of being able to say, okay, if you're a Jake of all trades, embrace that. Find these key transferable traits that you can bring the most value to each situation and work on those. Build those skills up, because then that's what's going to make you be able to give the most value possible and to be able to reach your potential, because your gifts aren't for yourself. Your gifts are to be given. And so if you can focus on those gifts, you maximize those, and you can help bring so much value to people's lives by giving those gifts to the best of your individual ability. It's not a Jake versus a Gordon versus a Cherise. It's Cherise has gifts that I will never be able to reach whatsoever. And, that's where you can be your best for other people. And that's where you can make the most difference in people's lives. And, part of that gift is actually suffering. Because so much of this world today is teaching you to avoid suffering. And part of, looking back at these 5 traits, there are things I don't necessarily want to do. Like, I don't want to get up in the morning at 5 a.m. sometimes and go to the field and run and, do stuff like that. I hate it sometimes. When you get done with it, you're happy because you've pushed through, and there's an element of being able to embrace that suffering, lean into that suffering to get through it. And when you start doing that, you being in chronic pain and being able to push through and persevere that suffering, you're in a completely different mind frame, in a completely different place that most of society is, because they're seeking comfort and, ordering food on Uber and then going on Netflix all night.
Has observing how your dad's mindset has shifted through these years of chronic pain, has that given you more context and just, has it given you more strength to explore this part of yourself in endurance and discipline?
Yeah, I think there's a key part that we actually, I've listened to most of the podcasts. I'm sorry, I haven't listened to 112 yet. There's a few that haven't been released, and that's my excuse for not hearing them all as of yet. But one of these key pieces, when I look back on it, there was a lot of times when Dad would say, you know what, today's the day that I'm going to change it. And a couple of days in, you failed. And there was so many times where you're like, no, today's the day that I'm going to be transformed, and I'm going to step in it. And I saw you fail time after time after time. And then there was a time where it switched on and you never looked back. And so for people, I would say, no matter how many times you've tried to start something, there's always another chance to be able to get back up and step forward in it. Don't let the past failures dictate your identity and who you are.
That's so good.
Because your identity is in 2 parts. Your identity, number 1, is in your being, who you are. Like, I could tell you I'm Jacob Scott Selly, and I could tell you who my parents are. I could tell you who my family is. I could tell you who I am, a son of God. And those things will never change no matter what I do.
And
then there's the second element.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Dad. This time you're actually listening to me. So we were talking about Bible studies. I had a long childhood of 10-minute Bible studies that turned into 45 minutes. And Chris and I were trying not to fall asleep.
Chris did fall asleep.
Yes, he did. So, but that second element of your identity is your habits and helping to form who you are. And you can fully control that second part. And so don't let your failings of the past dictate your identity of today and tomorrow.
Yes. I was just going to say, on your identity, you didn't mention that you are number 2 to JJ, Jake Jr. So
yes, that's okay.
Which is wonderful.
That is a role I will happily accept.
Yes, it is. Jake, this is great stuff that you're sharing with everyone, because it does aptly apply to chronic suffering, people in long-term suffering. And people sometimes feel like they only see the past failures because pain is a constant reminder. And then pain raises its voice when you take those first few steps. So breaking through, getting into that field, even with yourself. You mentioned you went to Australia at 23 years of age.
I think he ran away from you, Gordon.
Well, maybe.
He couldn't move another
piece
of
furniture.
I think
remember you made me move a standing desk once, and the desk ended up being crooked.
No, I think Rebecca had a big influence on that. So, so the deal is, when you have to learn how to drive on the other side of the road, you have to learn basically monetary exchange is completely different. You have to learn a
Just
new
cultural
place,
nuances.
cultural, everything else. What got you to that place where you could just break through some of those trials when past failures had to be there for you all the time?
Yeah. Yeah.
What moved you forward through that barrier?
Embracing it and going towards it.
Embracing it and going towards it.
There's a common theme.
There's a common theme.
And it doesn't matter if it's the one in pain or the one enduring and watching somebody in pain.
Pain is inevitable.
Yeah.
No matter what. You can't avoid it.
And I don't think it needs to be worshipped and glamorized. There's nothing beautiful, honestly, about pain. But what is beautiful is the outcome that it can do in your own mindset, as you're saying. And I would say it also applies to the caregiver. And being in the role of being the one that stood by one in pain, or that's so many caregivers. I just want to reach out and hug each one of you that are in pain yourself, because there is a long, silent road of endurance that you're going through when somebody is a caregiver and loving somebody who is in pain. And the thing is, you may not have any control over your loved one's pain, but you have 100% control over your own mindset and how you are going to walk through the journey too. And I want to say thank you, because bringing up what you just brought up, it motivates me. I'm thinking about it again. Like, how important is mindset? We're not diminishing anything about having a life of faith, because obviously faith to me is the most important thing. But you can have faith and still have a terrible mindset.
I think that mindset is a precursor to having a strong faith. I genuinely do, because that discipline that you build within that mindset helps build the discipline of your faith to be ready in season and out of season.
Yeah.
Because without that discipline, your faith is just up and down, up and down. And so
it's emotional.
Right. And faith is not an emotional thing. Faith is a mental process. So when you're embracing your suffering, what you're basically saying is, I'm embracing the things in darkness and the things that are unfamiliar and the things that actually hurt me. And I have to go with an attitude of forgiveness. And I have to not be hard on myself, and I'm not going to wear a blanket of shame anymore. And I'm not going to put guilt on myself. I'm going to walk through the process of living. And so when you're in the process of living, you're reconciling your entire will of who you are to God. It's a Romans 12:1-2 message. And what does he do? By the renewal of your mind. That's when you're going to see transformation occur in your entire being. So that's a big key.
Now, I'm seeing transformation occur because he didn't break out in a 45-minute Bible study.
This time I was able to put you in your place a little bit to be able to step back. But
45-minute podcast.
That's so good, Gordon.
An additional one. Absolutely true. We're nearing the end of this particular podcast. Let's spend a little time on our valuable takeaway. And we'll go with Cherise first. Jake will follow with you, and then I'll conclude.
I would just say it's so important what I got from this, Jake, with your 5 things, remain adaptable. Because in the caregiver or the spouse's journey, sometimes I create areas of inflexibility that I need to stop doing that. And I need to be adaptable for today, for this day. But stay disciplined, but remain adaptable. And thank you. That's a very valuable takeaway.
Beautiful, sweetheart. Jake, what are you thinking?
I think takeaway for today is around this element of 5 things that you can focus on every single day. Focus on what you can do. Focus not on what you're lacking, but the areas that you can make a difference. Fill your cup so then you can be able to fill other people's cups. So you can do those 5 things, and like renewing your mind, make one of those things. spending 20 minutes in scripture, whatever it is. It feels rigid. It does feel rigid at first, but this rigidity creates consistency, and that creates the transformation.
Good.
And so you be adaptable in a lot of ways of being able to care and be able to be flexible, in the midst of life. But in these core things, these are the areas that help make you adaptable. And so finding these core areas that you can be growing in and stepping through that process of transformation, not seeking the success or the end result, it can help move the needle. So find those 5 things that you can do to help make that difference and to help get you on that path where you're not going to look back.
Good.
That's good. For me, it was Jake brought up the fact that he witnessed past failures in my life over and over again.
No.
So I want to explain how I think those happened. I think this is the valuable takeaway. If you're avoiding pain and you think you're going to try something new where pain is not involved, you'll continue to fall. You'll stumble and fall. The second you embrace pain, any falling or stumbling is nothing. It means nothing to your new mindset. So there's really no such thing as failure. You're in a process of learning. And when you embrace this, you're in a process of living. And when you embrace pain, you're also in a process of loving. And your communication opens up much greater with other people where there's no embarrassment to a past failure. It doesn't mean anything because you're focused on what's new and what lies ahead tomorrow. Even in your present day thinking, you bring the new things from the future into your present instead of focusing on the past things that make you sick.
That's healthy, Gordon.
Okay?
Yes.
So that's it for today.
Yep.
Jake,
Thank you.
thank you.
I love you.
We're so happy to have you. It's overwhelming, honestly, to have you.
I'm already having tears when they have to go back to Australia. But Cherise, why don't you close this? How do we get connected with Gordon and Cherise?
Well, I think we've established that we have an app.
The app is
Yes. So please go to gordonandcherise.com, and from there you can find and subscribe to our podcast, YouTube, Facebook, but very importantly, go to Apple Store, get our app.
It's free, by the way, Cherise.
And Gordon, how do they find it at the Apple Store?
Well, just type in under the search bar Gordon and Cherise and it'll pull it up. It's it's a blue logo type thing for the app where you just go ahead and hit G and C and then it opens up everything. Now, here's what's beautiful. You can start registering for the online courses.
Absolutely.
And they're under $100. And the first one has 19 videos moving you from a place of hopelessness into a place of transformation.
It fits in with this mindset.
It fits with the mindset and it's practical. You can go through a video, write some things down, and even do what Jake was talking about. Start making changes with 5 different tasks that are critical and core values of your life that move you forward.
These courses are very different than the style of the podcast show that we do, but they're so instructional, they're quick, they're meaningful. I'm so excited about these courses.
Oh, we've got great things coming in the future.
Yeah.
I can feel it. Thank you very much for the show. Jake, thank you from traveling all the way from Australia.
Just for this podcast.
Just for this podcast. And Cherise, thank you for being my partner in life. And love all of you. And we'll see you again next week.
We
Cherise.
will see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Safe travels to you, Jake.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.